Everyone. Yes, I am doing an Instagram live because I want to understand what is happening in Wisconsin with the Supreme Court election. And hi, everyone. I'm starting to look like, do you remember that Brett Summers who was on the Match Game who had those big glasses, or maybe Iris Appel? Anyway, hi, everyone. Hi, Julia. I'm going to be talking to Charlie Sykes, you guys, because hi, Wisconsin. I'm so glad you're tuning in. So you might have some good comments for us. There's a very, very important election that's happening tomorrow in Wisconsin. It's the Supreme Court. Hello, Connecticut, Mama Cascone. And so Charlie Sykes is one of my favorite people. He's kind of not doing a lot of Instagram lives, or at least with me lately, but he said he would talk to me and kind of just fill us in. Hi, Wendy. Oh, Wendy Davis. Oh, I'm honored. Hello, Wendy Davis. Thank you for joining. And Charlie's going to kind of explain to all of us what is happening in Wisconsin. Here you are, Charlie. Hi.
Hey, good to be back with
It
you.
is so nice to see you again, Charlie. You've been blowing me off lately, and I understand.
I think that's not quite the case, but I'm glad to be here. Okay, so
Okay, well, I'm very
it's
excited
me, not
too. And
you. So,
okay, well, I listen, I think you probably needed to take a little break, as all of us feel now and then. But I'm really happy to see you, Charlie, because obviously you live in Wisconsin, you know Wisconsin better than anyone. And we thought about talking about this when we were discussing it. My team and I this morning, we said, oh my God, maybe Charlie will talk to us about it. So, tomorrow is election day in Wisconsin. It is a Supreme Court race that is incredibly important. But I'm going to stop talking because you are so great in these interviews. And I'm just going to let you explain why this race, well, what the race is and why it's so important. And then anyone has questions, please put them in the question section. Take it away, Charlie.
okay, so thank you so much for the invitation to be able to talk about this. I mean, I have been talking about Wisconsin State Supreme Court races, I think, probably for about 30 years, but have never seen anything remotely like this. I think the spending on the last race was about $50 million. This one is going to be close to $100 million. So it's important on two different levels. I mean, let's start with the fact that the Supreme Court has 7 members. It's a 4-3 liberal majority just in the last election. So there's tremendous, tremendous stakes for abortion rights, redistricting, congressional redistricting, employee rights. Normally, that would be enough to make this very interesting. But set aside the objective importance of this race, because if the conservative wins, they'll flip the court from 4-3 liberal to 4-3 conservative. The larger narrative importance of this is that Elon Musk has made this a referendum on himself. He's parachuted into Wisconsin. He's put in something like $26 million, including handing out those $1 million checks. So he and Donald Trump are all in on this race. And that's almost understating it, because every single piece of literature I get for the conservative candidate for this, remember, this is a judgeship, one seat on the Supreme Court, $100 million. Mm-hmm. Every single piece of literature I get for the conservative Brad Schimmel features Donald Trump, that you have to vote for Schimmel to support Donald Trump's agenda. You need to vote for Schimmel to protect Donald Trump. Schimmel has given speeches where he says we need to create a support network for Donald Trump. There's no pretense that we're talking about an independent judiciary or judges who don't prejudge the cases. And the irony is that I know these guys. I was actually watching a videotape of Brad Schimmel, and he was saying that he doesn't know what Elon Musk is doing or why Elon Musk is doing it. And I'm thinking, this guy is so full of shit, because of course he does. And so this has become ground zero in American politics. The spin on Wednesday is going to be extraordinary no matter what, because it will tell us a lot about the trajectory of American politics, whether or not the Trump honeymoon is over, because this is kind of a referendum now on Trump and Musk. If the conservative wins, Elon Musk will be the undisputed enforcer and kingmaker in Republican politics. On the other hand, if he loses, There's going to be a lot of air going out of that balloon, and there's going to be a lot of knives out.
Y-
So that's the overview of
Yeah.
this race.
Well, let me ask you about what Elon Musk is doing, because my understanding was the Attorney General of
Right.
Wisconsin was like, no, you can't
Yeah.
do that. You can't pay people $1 million if they're going to vote for the candidate you want
Thanks.
to win. And then I understand the Supreme Court said it was okay. Will you tell me about that and what went down there?
Well, I think it's kind of complicated. First of all, I mean, look, the logical question anyone should ask is, how is that possibly legal? Do you remember when there was all that controversy over whether it was going to be a crime to hand out food and water to people who were standing
Right.
in line to vote on a
Water
hot day?
bottles.
And he's
Right.
handing out
Larry David,
$1 million.
curb your enthusiasm, right?
Right. So I think part of it is enforcing a law in advance of the crime being committed. Maybe that was. The other problem was the state Supreme Court, every member of the state Supreme Court except one, is actively involved in this campaign. They all had to recuse themselves, essentially. There was no
Oh,
way that the liberal majority is all out campaigning for Susan Crawford. The conservatives are campaigning for Brad Schimmel. So they were never going to get involved in all of this. But this has become a key issue in this race. The perception that the world's richest man, who's in the process of slashing and cutting and burning all these programs, is trying to buy a Supreme Court seat in the state of Wisconsin. So we're not California, we're not New York or Florida. To spend $100 million in Wisconsin, or Musk's money, is a lot of money. And so this has become kind of the dominant issue in the campaign.
well, is it turning people off? And is this a referendum, Charlie, on Trump or on Elon Musk? Because honestly, I mean, I would be so grossed out if I was a Wisconsin voter that this guy, talk about a carpetbagger, that is coming in, spending a boatload of money and trying to influence what's happening in my state. And I know there's all sorts of implications for gerrymandering and stuff
Yes.
like that too. So is this working? Are people like into Elon Musk sticking his nose into Wisconsin's business so blatantly?
Well, we're going to be a lot smarter 24 hours from now. Trust me, you know how this turns out. I mean, Trump did win Wisconsin this last
Yeah,
time.
but he did he narrowly,
Yeah,
right?
well, but everything's narrow in Wisconsin. So one of what Musk is doing, I mean, this is part of the strategy. The Musk strategy is not to persuade swing voters. The Musk strategy is to turn out low propensity Trump voters. These are people who would not normally turn out in an off-year election, a judicial election. They're the kind of people that show up maybe once every 4 years to vote for Donald Trump, but for nobody else. So they are spending millions of dollars to turn those voters out. And that's one of the reasons why Trump won the election, is those people that generally don't show up would show up. So you have both of these things. Number one is he's pursuing a strategy that might be effective. On the other hand, there is blowback. Look, there's been a lot of speculation that Democrats are demoralized or they're checking out. This is what they needed in Wisconsin to motivate them.
I
And
was going to say, couldn't it have the other effect?
yes,
Obviously, getting what did you call them?
low
Voters who don't
propensity.
yeah, sorry, low propensity voters, but
Yeah.
also pissing off Democrats and getting them to come out en masse, right?
Yes. Yes. And so that's the Democrats are playing this card. They're playing it hard. They're making this a referendum on Elon Musk. You asked a really good question. Is this a referendum on Musk and Trump, Musk or Trump? And the answer is yes, both of them. Um, Musk is much less popular than Trump. Trump is underwater, but in Wisconsin, the most recent poll would show that Musk only has an approval rating of about 41%. 53% disapprove. I think it's probably worse than that, because think about all the things that have happened in the last several weeks.
I was
If
going
you
to
wanted
say
to pick the one,
that polling might have lagged,
right,
right, Charlie? But what
right,
about Trump? What about Trump's approval rating in Wisconsin? I know Politico a few
yeah,
days ago talked about rural swaths of
yep,
Wisconsin where Trump won are facing the effects of the policies that are going to affect their bottom lines, things like tariffs
right,
and the Agriculture Department, Department
yep,
of Agriculture's funding freeze. So these super pro-Trump voters, though, even if they were low propensity, whatever, are they sort of a little down on Trump right now because of these policies?
We don't know, and I guess one of the big questions is, have they really felt the effect of those policies yet? I mean, Liberation Day is Wednesday, April
But
2nd.
explain I mean,
That,
everyone
that's
knows.
that's when he imposes all these massive tariffs on all of these countries, including our allies, 25% tariffs on cars, reciprocal tariffs on Europe. We don't know. I do know that there are a lot of people in rural Wisconsin, the farmers, who are very, very concerned about the impact and whether they're going to get bailed out because they had to be bailed out last time. What I don't know, and what we'll find out shortly, is whether this will show up in the election tomorrow. Ask me 6 weeks, 6 months from now how this is playing out, because I mean it's an amazing story. I mean, in the last several, you asked about lagging poll numbers. I mean, since this poll was taken in early March, we really had the Doge attack on Social Security and Medicare. It's become very, very obvious that this chainsaw is going to be hitting lots of programs that are very popular, including popular among Trump voters.
Mhm.
Now, whether they have fully taken that on board, whether they realize that, I don't know. I don't know. We're going to find out.
Why should people who don't live in Wisconsin really care about this story, Charlie? I'm just curious. I think I have some followers in Wisconsin,
Yeah.
but not that many. Come Wisconsin, follow us and subscribe to our newsletter and watch my videos. But what would you say to people who don't live in Wisconsin?
Okay, well, that's a really interesting question, because it is so ironic that we're talking about one seat on one Supreme Court being a national issue. And I think it's because of the political narrative. So, again, think about Wednesday morning. This will say a lot about the mood of the Republican Party, the direction of the narrative. If conservatives win here in Wisconsin, it will be wind at the back for Republicans, for Donald Trump, and for Elon Musk. Why is Elon Musk caring so much about Wisconsin? I mean, he would tell you, well, it's because of congressional
I
redistricting
know why
control.
he
That's
cares.
it. Why?
Because his company Tesla is involved in a
Yes,
lawsuit in Wisconsin that could ultimately end up
yes.
before the Wisconsin State
That
Supreme Court.
that's one
And I
reason.
know this because I have a great team of
You're
producers who
right.
feed me that information. Tell me about this lawsuit. What's it about?
Well, it's about whether or not he can run a dealership. But I don't think that's the main. That's one of the reasons. But I think right now it's like him. Let me put this in a way that's PG-13.
Oh, you don't
That he wants.
have to. It's
He,
Instagram Live.
well, this one is, he wants to be the guy swinging the biggest stick. Let me just put it that way. And this is like his clout, and he is the superstar. And he wants to show Republicans who've been, starting to get nervous about him, and Republicans are very nervous about what's going to happen in Florida, whether they're going to control the House and whether the honeymoon's over. And Elon Musk wants to be the superstar who comes in and says, in one of the key swing states in America, look what I can do. I am all powerful, because this will be a narrative change one way or another. Now, if he loses, if the Democrats, if the liberal, it's a nonpartisan race. If the liberal wins and Elon Musk $26 million goes up in flames, they're going to be knives out, people saying, so Elon, maybe you are less, the superstar than a boat anchor. Maybe you're part of the problem. Maybe this is more indication that what you're doing is politically toxic for us. And right now, Republicans are very, very nervous. The tariffs are coming. The scandal about Signalgate, which you have talked about. All of these things are happening. So why should people outside of Wisconsin care? Because this is going to be one of the big narrative drivers in terms of, can Democrats get their act together? Or is this an indication that Donald Trump and Elon Musk can go anywhere, do anything, and they're not stoppable? That's really, it's almost the vibe more important than the seat. Although here in Wisconsin, I mean, this is an up or down vote on whether or not abortion is going to be legal in Wisconsin. I mean, there's just no question about it. It's a 4-3 majority. The conservative wins. Abortion will be banned. We will have the 1849 law go into effect. The state will remain gerrymandered. Uh, Public employees will still not be able to engage in collective bargaining. But I guess this is one of the surprises of the year. One would have thought that this election would be this massive referendum on abortion rights, but instead Elon Musk has made it about him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's going to be second guessed if he's not
But
successful.
won't it also be about Donald Trump? I mean, you can say, "Oh, Elon over," he shot his wad in Wisconsin, and he shouldn't have had. He shouldn't have done that, and it's all Elon's fault. Doesn't Elon's behavior give Donald Trump cover that people are turned off by Elon, not Trump himself?
Well, that will be interesting. Now that will be interesting to see whether they try to play that card, because yes, you could make that argument, but Donald Trump is at the top of he's at the top of the food pyramid. He's at the top of the power pyramid, and his popularity is what's driving all of this. And he still has to go to Congress. Remember, he's still got to get. He hasn't had any legislation passed of really real significance yet, and he can't afford to lose anybody. He cannot afford for Republicans in swing districts to get nervous. So if he does think that this was Elon, not me, then does that mean that he's going to start cutting Elon Musk loose? Does that mean that Elon Musk's clout and his influence is going to diminish? I mean, that's why people outside of Wisconsin should care about this, because the internal Game of Thrones is going to be very intense starting Wednesday,
So
depending on what happens here in Wisconsin.
so if it doesn't go well, the bromance maybe, if not over, then cooling off a bit. And I think we should mention, though, Susan Crawford, who's a liberal candidate, has gotten a lot of money from
Yeah.
some very rich Democrats. Can you talk about that, Charlie?
Yeah, you can't get to $100 million without people on both sides giving. So, you've had, J.B. Pritzker and others who've donated big money. And I think it's part of it. It's like people get on the phone and they go, well, look, Elon Musk is putting in this much. We need to put in, a certain amount of money as well. So, one of the debates that we need to have is about campaign finance reform and the role of big money, frankly, on both sides, but also whether or not it's a good idea to elect judges when you have people who are out of state with deep pockets who are prepared to do this sort of thing, because this is not good for the judiciary, and it's not healthy for American politics that one man can dump in this kind of money. I've been around long enough that I remember we had heated Supreme Court races in the state of Wisconsin where the spending was in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, not hundreds of millions of dollars. I remember when there were races for governor and U.S. Senate that were under $10 million. So this is so out of any scale. And it's in many ways because, as I mentioned earlier, it is now become this proxy war between Trump and anti-Trump, between the right and the left, between the resistance, which has been looking for some way, what do we do? How do we draw a line? And they've decided to do it in those Florida congressional races, but much more so up here in Wisconsin.
A lot of people are asking in the question section, how can Elon Musk handing out money not be viewed as election tampering?
I think it's clearly illegal behavior. But I'm not the Attorney General or a Supreme Court justice. I cannot imagine how you can go around and hand out $100 bills, $1 million checks to voters without it violating the law. If it doesn't violate the law, then there is no law. Then there is no such thing as election tampering. So I don't know. It's a legitimate question. The Attorney General here tried to make that case. I hope he makes it after the case as well. Okay, so once the crime has been committed, you can bring the charges. And so, he was not able to stop the crime from being committed, but once it's committed, I think someone should be held accountable for it. And I think it's an excellent question.
I wanted to ask you about sort of the other big news story is, I guess, President Trump said on Meet the Press with Kristen Welker that he was thinking about running a third term, a second time, or another
Third
term.
term, yeah.
Yeah, third term, sorry. And I forget his exact quote, but sort of like there are ways around it. Steve Bannon has suggested that
Yeah.
as well. What did you think of that? And do you think that's true? And one of my followers says, what can we do? Or is it too late?
Well, it's not too late. So I actually did a podcast today with David Jolly, the former congressman, and we were discussing this. I'm going to post it tomorrow. And I said, I want to make it really clear that 2 months ago, if you would have asked me this, I would have said, no, this is one of those distractions. This is one of those digressions. It's a conspiracy theory. There's no way it's going to happen. But now I think that watching Donald Trump in action and knowing what we have learned over the last 8 years, we need to take it seriously. We need to take it literally and
Well,
seriously.
how would he do it, Charlie?
Well, let me first of all start with you mentioned Steve Bannon. How many times have we seen in the last 8-10 years an idea that's sort of a crazy, nutty idea out on the edges of the fever swamp that gradually becomes mainstream and then eventually becomes Republican orthodoxy? Think about January 6th. Think about the whole idea, what we thought about it, and think about what the Republican Party has decided to embrace when it comes to what Donald Trump tried to do then. So could this be the same thing where the idea is percolating, it sounds crazy, but who's going to stand up against it? Who in the Republican Party is going to tell Donald Trump no? What sort of national emergency might they cook up? Now, one of the ideas he's floating out apparently is that he runs for vice president, that J.D. Vance runs as at the top of the ticket. J.D. Vance wins, and then he quits and lets Trump become president again. These are crazy, crazy ideas. But Katie, in case you haven't noticed, these are crazy, crazy times. And Donald Trump has shown a willingness to break every other rule, every other norm in the pursuit of power. There's no ideological principle that governs him. But if Donald Trump thinks that he can hang on to power, that he can come up with some sort of an excuse, knowing that the courts might not block him, well, we'll get to the courts in a minute, the Republican Party won't block him, that he might be able to get state secretaries of state to put him on the ballot. I don't know. I think it's a crazy idea. It's clearly unconstitutional. I mean, you could say there's no way that will be allowed, but look at what Donald Trump has done in the first 60-some days. And then ask yourself, how many times has he shown that he is willing to bend reality in his interest? So,
but Charlie, it's a long way to 2028, right?
oh yeah.
And you and I haven't spoken since Donald Trump was elected, since the craziness of the last 2 months. I mean, I can't even name all the things
Right.
that he has done that are so controversial. And I'm curious, I mean, I feel like you're a very seasoned political observer. What do you see unfolding? I mean, you just did sort of a scary scenario
Yeah.
for many people who don't want to see Donald Trump president for 4 more years after
Uh-huh.
this. Um, do you see the Democrats getting their act together? Do you see anybody rising as a potential uh, leader in the Democratic Party? Do you see that some of Trump's policies are going to be hurting the very voters who put him into office, who believe that he cares deeply about their status and their fate? Do you think that the change in the global world order and cozying up to Vladimir Putin is going to backfire? I mean, you're watching all of this unfold, I'm sure, like many of us are. And what do you think is going to happen, Charlie?
We don't know, except that this is why my slogan on my podcast is just remember that we are not the crazy ones here, because this stuff is bizarre, and it is hard to track what's going to happen. In answer to your question, I mean, you hope all of those things blow up. You hope the switching sides in the Cold War, that he pays a price for that, smashing the world economy. We're finding out today that with these tariffs that we've driven Korea and Japan to sit down with China and come up with a response. He ran on inflation, and yet the price of things is going to go up. So you hope that the laws of political gravity catch up with Donald Trump. But, he has managed to escape them for a very, very long time. So you asked about whether the Democrats will get their act together. I think we're going to get an answer to an equally important question even sooner than that, though, is will the courts hold the line? Trump has made it very clear he's trying to bully and intimidate the Supreme Court, trying to say, nice court you have there. It'd be really a shame if anything happened to it. If I defy your orders, what happens? I mean, this is when we talk about a constitutional crisis. this is going to come to a head. It could come to a head this year. So will the courts be that final guardrail, or will they break too?
Well,
And then, of course, you have the question about the Democrats.
I was going to say, well, will the courts be the final guardrails? I'm sorry if my audio
Yeah.
sounds weird, but the question is, will the Trump administration obey the courts?
We, if you listen to them, and one of the things I've learned is that you need to take some of it serious. If you listen to some of the rhetoric from the MAGA right, you see that they're ginning themselves up into a full out assault on the federal judiciary. The fact that you have the Speaker of the House of Representatives talking about defunding district courts that come up with rulings, this attack on the law firm, saying any lawyer that does something that we don't like, we're going to retaliate against. We don't know the answer to that question yet. So, I mean, but they are clearly talking themselves into defying court orders. Remember when he tweeted out that Napoleon quote, sort of,
Right.
he who saves the nation cannot break the law, says every autocrat in history. So, again, these are the big tests. The Democrats clearly have not figured out yet how to respond. Chuck Schumer is not the leader they've been waiting for. But then again, I'm not sure that Bernie Sanders is either. So
And
we're going to have to see
King
how this plays
Jeffries,
out.
I interviewed at King
Yeah.
Jeffries, and he doesn't seem to have the fire that's needed at this moment in time.
Hmm. Yeah, maybe the leadership's going to have to come from outside the political class. Because people are angry. People are, and again, we'll have a lot more answers, 24, 48 hours from now. But
Well,
but, but
it's
I,
going to be, I was going to say it's going to be such a fascinating litmus test. And I
oh
heard
yeah,
you say, you talk about we could be in a full blown constitutional crisis. There are many historians and experts I've already interviewed, Charlie, who said we were in a constitutional crisis weeks ago.
yeah.
Do you believe that's the case?
I think we're certainly on the precipice. There's no question about it, and I take their arguments very, very seriously. What you're seeing with Elon Musk and the power that he's wielding in the government and the willingness to break the law is completely unprecedented. There's no this is like what happened during no. There's nothing like what we're seeing here, and given and this administration is so emboldened, and I do blame, by the way, the Roberts Court for having immunized him. They are so emboldened knowing that there is no legal barrier that stops them from violating any law whatsoever. And I think that's one of the reasons why there's so much fear, because in the Oval Office, Donald Trump can say, I can't be touched, and any one of you that violates the law, I will pardon. So what is the recourse? What is the accountability? So there's real fear out there. And I think that's the recognition that this does not follow any of the normal rules of American constitutional life or culture. And I think that's where you have that disconnect between people like the Chuck Schumers. I'm going to pick on him again. Um, who seem to think that this is just sort of it's really bad, but it's I recognize this. No, it's really bad, and you don't recognize this in American culture.
Well, these are very strange times indeed. And, I know that there are protests planned. Do you see any kind of resistance to Donald Trump starting to percolate and uh, move into action, to protests on the streets, to other
Yes,
political activism? Are
I
you
do.
starting to see that?
Yeah, I have it, and I'm sure you are as well. Look, there's anger out there, and it hasn't yet totally been focused. And again, you're seeing people showing up at these town hall meetings. You're going to see a big turnout in these special elections in Florida and in Wisconsin. We'll see whether they fall short or not. There is a real anger out there. There was a period of time when people were disconnecting, and when I think they were so demoralized, they didn't want to watch anything, they didn't want to hear anything, they didn't want to do anything. I think that's come to an end. How it's channeled is something different. I have to say I get a little queasy with all the focus on let's go after Tesla cars. I mean, I understand the impulse, you know, I mean, every time I drive into a parking lot and I see one of those cyber trucks, I think that's the ugliest fucking car I've ever seen in my life. You know,
I
exactly.
always go like this to the
It,
driver.
it's designed by a kindergartner. It's just
It
appalling. But
does.
anyway,
There is
I,
a Lego quality to it,
yeah,
and I just wonder about the people behind the wheel.
oh,
Like
I
what?
don't wonder. Yeah, but I guess I'm not. People are so angry. They're looking for ways to channel that, and I'm not sure that we've gotten to that point. But this has real vibes for me of what it felt like on the other side in 2009 when the Tea Party was starting and it was beginning to percolate up. Went in some pretty awful directions, but there was a real sense that now was the time to get engaged, and I think that's happening now. Again, you have to win some elections. You have to win some legal fights. You ran through a list of things that are could go wrong. Look, Donald Trump is in the process of. I mean, there's some things that clearly he's got public opinion behind him. On the border, on some of the things he's doing, but in terms of the tariffs, in terms of cost of living, in terms of going after Social Security and Medicare, which is still the third rail of American politics, the arrogance, things like Signalgate that make you wonder, has he surrounded himself with complete idiots? We haven't even talked about Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who has driven out the nation's leading vaccine expert. Look, if you're a parent or a grandparent, this is going to get very, very real when you begin to realize that this administration, which ran on the price of eggs, might be opening the door for the return of things that we haven't talked about in generations, polio and measles and things like that, rubella, that had been abolished. All of those things in a rational political universe would be catastrophic for the party in power. And we're going to start to see whether or not that's the case with Donald Trump.
The stock market,
Yes.
volatility, the fact that these tariffs are designed to bring back manufacturing, that could take years, if that happens at all, right?
Well, that's right. And yet people are going to experience the pain. And here's part of the real problem. I mean, part of it's really structural. He runs on this populist, I am the voice of the little man. And then he has surrounded himself with a cabinet of billionaires. And I have to say, if you listen to the billionaires long enough, I don't know if you know many billionaires,
I
but
don't.
they're not as smart as they think they are. They're arrogant assholes, but they're not the genius, world class geniuses they think. When that Howard Lutnick, and I'm
I know. I was like, how tone deaf can you be? First of
exactly.
all, not, talking about his mother-in-law not complaining if she doesn't get her social security check, but then also hawking Tesla stock on Fox, which is a clear violation, isn't it, Charlie, of the Hatch Act and all kinds of other
Oh yeah,
things?
as if we had laws anymore. But I want to go back to the mother-in-law thing, where here's a guy who is saying that people if won't mind if they miss their social security check because his mother-in-law wouldn't complain, and the only people that would complain about missing a social security check would be the fraudsters. This is a man who lives in a bubble, inside a silo, inside I don't know what, because the vast majority of people who get social security checks, trust me, they know when the check is coming, they rely on it, and they will raise holy hell. Not the fraudsters, the actual, and we're talking about tens of millions of people who have been lifted out of poverty by these programs. And so Howard Lutnick, I don't know, has never talked to an actual person who isn't his driver or his cook. I mean, what kind of a mentality? But then think about an entire cabinet built of people like this. They're all Fox News hosts and billionaire buddies of Donald Trump. These people are supposed to be the champions of the little guy. These are supposed to be the architects of this populist revolution. What could possibly go wrong?
Not to mention, I mean, I thought that comment that he made was so grotesque and so
Yeah.
so tone deaf. And do you think anybody, I mean, is Signalgate just going to go away? Or is anybody going to be held accountable for that moronic breach of security with highly sensitive information?
I don't know that Donald Trump is going to fire anybody because Donald Trump has this culture where you never admit you made a mistake.
Right.
But
Thank you,
but
Roy Cohn.
yes, exactly. This has legs. because, and you can see this from the polls, you can see this from the memes, people understand it. People recognize how horrible and dangerous it is and, as a serious threat to national security. They also realize how hilariously incompetent it was. You know, when you are a skit on SNL, it's broken through. When
Yeah.
you see the polls showing that 70% of Americans think, yeah, this was pretty stupid. So if you're Donald Trump and one of your main selling points is you are strong and you will protect America, and then America starts looking at these chodes you have running national security, how reckless and arrogant and sloppy they are, it's not a good thing. It's not positive.
As they say, it's not a good look,
It is
Charlie.
not.
When will we know the results of this referendum on both Donald Trump and Elon Musk tomorrow in Wisconsin with the Supreme Court judiciary vote?
Well, you'll know what the results are in Florida much earlier because that'll happen. I think that the polls close at 7 o'clock Eastern time. You probably know by 7:30. It doesn't. The Democrats do not need to win those seats, but if they overperform, it'll be a sign. I think I'm sorry to say that the Wisconsin race might not be decided until late because Milwaukee often doesn't come with doesn't count all of its absentee votes until the middle of the night, which has bred all of these Republican conspiracy theories. But I think savvy observers will have a pretty good idea by 9 or 10 o'clock. But then again, everything in Wisconsin is close. Every major race that we've had for years has been decided by about 20,000 votes.
Well,
And this
yeah.
may be the case
Well,
again.
I might text you or email you.
Uh,
So I know you're going to be busy tomorrow, but and don't kill me, Charlie. But before we go, just for my followers, can you explain what's happening in Florida and why that's so important as well?
Yeah, I'm less knowledgeable about that, but as I was talking with David Jolly, you have two seats that are held by Republicans, including Mike Walls, the
The
weirdly
mastermind
incompetent.
of Signalgate.
Yes,
Yeah.
but these are overwhelmingly Republican seats. These are, one of them is a plus 30 seat, the other's plus 37, and yet they are close within the margin of error. And so Republicans are going to drastically underperform, Democrats overperform. Very unlikely the Democrats will win those seats. But if they come anywhere close, it's a big warning sign because you think about if Democrats are overperforming by about 9 points, well, how many seats will that flip? The real tell about how nervous Republicans are, of course, was when Donald Trump dumped Elise Stefanik, who is a member of the House, who is about to become,
The
like today,
U.S. ambassador to the
she
UN.
had a party set up and everything, the drapes, the caterer, everything. She was going to get that job. Trump calls her up and says, Elise, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to unappoint you because we need you in the House of Representatives because we have a 2 vote margin. And we're kind of worried we might lose those races down in Florida. We wouldn't want to have you resign your seat. Look, that's not a move of a confident political party. So that's part of the fallout. But you'll know the results in Florida early, a little bit later in
All right.
Wisconsin.
Charlie Sykes, so great to see you, Charlie. Thank you for your time. You
Thank
are
you.
a brilliant explainer of all things politics, and I'm really grateful that you spent some time with us this afternoon or
Oh,
tonight. I'm in California, so it's late
oh, it's
afternoon
it's
for me.
it's it's dark here. Any time, and I will never blow you off. Never.
Okay, thank you,
Will not happen.
Charlie.
Trust me.
Thank you. Bye,
Okay.
everyone. Thanks for watching. Bye.